they know technically, but I think that air.
Locurco, City of Walnut Creek, and Transpac rep.
Andy Dillard, Town of Danville and SWAT.
Ahmed Abwali, City of Antioch, Transplant.
Barbara Hawkins, City of San Pablo.
Yvette Ortiz, City of El Cerrito and WICTAC.
Heather Ballinger, City of Walnut Creek, representing City County Engineers.
Michael Tanner, BART.
Laramie Bowern with the County Connection.
Tony Coe, Lafayette.
Did staff want to introduce themselves?
I'm Brad Beck, CCTA. I'm Walter Kieser, consultant to CCTA.
I'm Matt Kelly, CCTA.
Walt Allen with Parsons, helping out CCTA. Zachary Caltrans, District 4 Planning.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome. This is the time of the meeting for public comment, but I'm not seeing any members of the public. So moving on to item C, approval of summary actions. Do I have any comments or motions on this item?
Move approval. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the consent calendar. Do I have any motions on the consent calendar?
Move approval.
Any second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. A motion passes unanimously. Now moving on to the regular agenda items. Item 4, project monitoring. And we have a presentation from Stephanie.
Yep. Good afternoon, committee members. For your information, on pages 4-1 and 4-2, 4-9 are our monthly reports for OBAG, STIP, and FHWA inactive projects. This month, we started monitoring projects that are programmed for fiscal year 15-16, and they're on page 4-6. There are 15 projects in total, and totaling $18.1 million. Just another reminder that the RFA, or the request for authorization, E76 deadline for these projects is November 1st of this year, not February 1st of next year. And we just continue to ask that you would provide us updates every month so we can keep these reports accurate and as we monitor them monthly. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments from the committee? All right. Thank you, Stephanie. So moving on to item 5, submittal of draft 2015 Priority Development Area Investment and Growth Strategy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see. Item 5 is the submittal of the draft 2015 Priority Development Area, or PDA, Investment and Growth Strategy. As the CMA for Contra Costa, we are required by MTC under their Resolution 4035 to prepare annually and update annually a Priority Development Area Growth and Investment and Growth Strategy, or PDA strategy. And it is meant to do a number of things, primarily to outline the strategies and steps that we'll take to encourage development in priority development areas in the county. And most of the jurisdictions in Contra Costa do have priority development areas, and there are a number of steps that we have outlined to help encourage development, plan development within those priority development areas. The purpose of the resolution, MTC's resolution, or the purpose of the PDA strategy is to ensure that CMAs have a transportation project priority setting process for OBAG funding that supports and encourages development in the region's PDAs, recognizing that the diversity of PDAs will require different strategies. And the PDA strategies includes for Contra Costa includes 8 different actions that we plan on taking or have taken. The first initial strategy that we did 2 years ago focused on setting criteria for allocating funding through the One Bay Area Grant Program, or OBAG program. The second one, which we adopted last year, had our focus on that one was to try to fill in information about the different PDAs in Contra Costa. So there was a large section, an appendix in the document that went through every PDA in Contra Costa and identified the amount of development that was forecast in those areas or planned in those areas, some of the obstacles to achieving that planned development. This time around, we're trying to be a little more focused. It's a much, much shorter document, and the focus is to go through those 8 actions and talk about the status of what we've done so far. There's not, in that way, there's not a whole lot of information. It's more about what we've done for the OBAG grant program, which is the first one. There's a list of the projects that were funded. Integrating PDA support efforts in the CTP. We talk a bit about how we've incorporated forecasts that MTC and ABAG developed for the most recent RTP plan Bay Area and the first sustainable community strategy. We identify the 10 PDA planning grants that the authority has approved and which were approved last night, the formal scopes of work and co-op agreements and consultant agreements. Monitoring, planning, and development PDAs, that's something that ABAG has said that they're going to cover. And that's what I handed out today is what they've called a dashboard. It's titled Housing Permit Activity for Contra Costa Jurisdictions Within Priority Development Areas. Should say within, but didn't quite fix that. And it's got the RENA numbers for, it's got the housing numbers for calendar years 2013. Altogether in that year, there were 1,355 units developed or permitted. Of those, about 6% we know were in PDAs and 40% were outside, and 53% ABAG didn't know where they were. And I mention this and hand this out because it is something that ABAG is going to continue working with all the jurisdictions. They'll be bugging you, and we'll be helping them bug you to provide that information. Try to find out how much development really is occurring in PDAs and how much outside of it. Let's see. We also like to point out there is a study going on that's related to PDA development. It's a study that ABAG and MCC are working on now, and Walter Kieser from EPS is helping them on that study. It's an expansion of a study that was done earlier that looked at a subset of the PDAs in the Bay Area. This is an expanded subset, and it's going to look at some of the obstacles to development within those areas and try to draw some conclusions about how the region and jurisdictions could help encourage more development within those PDAs. Development in the PDAs is one of the key focuses of Plan Bay Area. I'll sort of leave it at that in terms of what's going on and more detail in the plan. It's things that you know as staff or jurisdictions what's going on. So what we're going to do is ask you to recommend to the Planning Committee and then the authority that we send this on to MTC and ABAG for their review. Final is due sometime this year. ABAG and MTC haven't been exact about the deadline for it, but we're supposed to submit a draft to them early in the year. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Do I have, John?
Brad, you mentioned this needs to be at MTC, I guess, by year's end at the latest.
A final, yes.
The final.
I don't know exactly. It could be October. I'm not exactly sure.
Would it? I don't know if it would be worthwhile, but to have the planning directors committee weigh in on this strategy. I don't know if their interests and knowledge would provide any additional or better input.
We've taken the PDA strategies to them before, and I think that's a good idea. We could present the draft to them as well. They'll be definitely the ones who we'd be bugging the planning staff about what's going on in terms of development in their jurisdictions.
I had a question about the ABAG numbers. It's just calendar year 2013. Are they going to have updated 2014 numbers?
They've said that's their intention. Yes, we haven't seen them yet, though.
But will those numbers be available to inform this PDA strategy, or what's the timing on trying to
That was the
incorporate?
intent, but we didn't get these until after summer, early fall, I think, of last year. So the delay was something like 9 months after the end of the calendar year. So probably we wouldn't be able to update. If we do, then have it before the final, then we'd be able to include it.
Okay.
One thing I do think that MTC and ABAG are considering when they update Resolution 4035 that they will make this a biennial document rather than an annual one, since as soon as you adopt one, then you have to immediately start updating it for the next year.
I just had a follow-up on that. Do they ever think about, besides just issuance of permit, do they think about when a project's been approved, like at an entitlement stage, that's an indicator? Because it takes a lot of time for a permit to be actually issued. And then I think about like our Walnut Creek BART project that's been approved for how many years, Jeremy?
A couple years.
Yeah.
I think they're having enough difficulty getting the permit numbers to expand that to entitlements might be. And sometimes things get entitled and never get built, so their focus is on what actually has a fair likelihood of being finalized and built and occupied.
I see that there was funding allocated in the prior year, it looks like, for PDAs. What about new PDAs coming up? Is this going to be ongoing revenues that are going to be made available for new PDAs that develop?
The two funding sources we address in the PDA strategy are the OBAG funding, the One Bay Area grant funding, and the PDA planning grants. MTC was going to release a call for a second round of OBAG funding this year. They decided, since federal revenues, which is what funds the OBAG grants, are lower than they expected, they decided instead of having a call this year, they'd wait a year, extend the OBAG program 1 year, fund some ongoing programs like the Regional Safe Routes to School program, extend those for 1 year, and then have a call for projects sometime next year, 2016, for the OBAG grants. I'm assuming, but I'm not certain and have not heard any word on it, whether there'll be additional funding for PDA planning grants in the next round of federal funding. It's possible, but I don't know. In terms of having new PDAs, ABAG is open to having new PDAs. It's up to the jurisdictions. There's a process that ABAG has established where you have to make an application and talk about your PDA, why it should be a PDA, what your plans are. If you have plans, or if you have plans to have a plan for your PDA. And there is a process, and I think they review them twice a year, I think, is their schedule. I may be wrong about that. Might be quarterly. It's on their website if you want to look at it. So Brentwood and Clayton, if you want to have a PDA, and you don't have one now, or Danville, if you want to try to get another one.
Any other questions or comments? So are you going to have the time to take this to the planning directors before the planning committee?
It'd be after the planning committee.
Okay.
They're meeting next month, second Friday,
Okay.
and the planning committee meeting is on the 1st of April.
Okay, so it'd be planning committee, planning directors, and then the board?
And then the board, yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you have any motions on recommended action, the CCTA, from the CCTA staff?
I'll move the recommendation.
Any second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thanks, Brad. Hi, Matt. Oh, moving on to item 6, the 2015 Congestion Management Program update.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. Good afternoon. Odd years mean two things to me. It's the year between Giants championships and another update of the Congestion Management Program. As a CMA, we are required by state legislation to prepare a congestion management program every other year. We actually have the option of doing it every year if we wanted to, but we choose to do it every other year. Just some background. This will be our 12th update of the congestion management program. We've been doing it since 1991. A little background. We don't do a major update every time. We do kind of a technical update of the congestion management program, and that's because we most of the requirements of the CMP we take care of in our growth management program. And I've mentioned this several times before in the past, but basically back in 1991 when the congestion management program was passed by state legislation, they used our growth management program as a template for the statewide congestion management program. So most everything that is required in the CMP we are already doing in the GMP. So in the CMP, we just kind of document what we've been doing in our growth management program, and that fulfills many of the requirements. One of the main things that we do that is required by the CMP is to monitor our CMP network. The CMP network is composed of all the freeways in the county and 65 intersections. Let me pass out. Coming around is a list of the 65 intersections. Many of you might have received an email from me last night which had this list attached to it. Basically, we're letting you know that we'll be out in many of your communities doing intersection counts. You shouldn't notice the freeway counts. It'll mostly be done using big data sources, so we won't, in most cases, we won't need people out on the Caltrans right-of-way. But we will have traffic counting firms out in your intersection right-of-ways in April and May. And so the email went out last night just to notify you that we'll be out there in April and May, and to inquire as to whether or not you have any requirements or permits for encroachment that the counting firms need to apply for. So if you're aware of any and your jurisdiction is on that list, please let me know and send me a copy of whatever permit is required, and our firms will fill that out. And also, if you need any more detailed notification, just let me know, and all the firms will be out there with a letter, a CCTA letterhead stating why they're out there. Sometimes people call the police when they see someone standing out on the corner. So sitting in a lawn chair, yeah. So they're starting to use some more innovative methods of like setting up a video camera and just then going back to the office and just transcribing everything off the camera. But there will be some counters out there, so please let me know. I've also, as far as the freeway portion goes, we'll be monitoring the new freeway segments of the former SR4 bypass. So I think down to Sand Creek Road, we'll start monitoring that as well. So, like I mentioned, we'll be basically doing a technical update of the 2013 CMP, and it'll focus on bringing it up to date on any changes that occurred, in kind of planning environment policy since 2013. So, some main components of the program include documenting those changes I just mentioned. So that would be like documenting the countywide transportation plan, documenting and proving consistency with the most recent RTP, which would be Plan Bay Area that was adopted in 2013. We have to demonstrate that we're consistent financially with the RTP's plan and as well as the modeling. So we show that our model is consistent with the MTC regional model. Another main thing we do is the capital improvement program. There's a 7-year CIP, which is basically a project list. We've come to you in past years and said, please, provide us your project updates for this. This time around, we'd like to just use the CTPL that's been updated for the countywide plan, which I've been bugging you guys about the last 6 months to get project updates. So we're thinking that would be sufficient for the 7-year CIP. And if anybody has any concerns about that there might be projects that they have that aren't included, you can feel free to state your case now, or you can talk to me offline, and we can decide if there is a need to really go out and open up the database for a call for projects. But we're thinking that it's pretty up to date right now because of all the work we've done for the countywide plan. We will be documenting performance measures. Performance measures are part of the CMP, so we'll include the MTSOs from the action plan updates, performance measures from the Sustainable Community Strategy, and the performance measures were used in the I-680 Corridor System Management Plan as part of the Smart Mobility Framework. That was a new component that comes from Caltrans, so we'll document all those. Let's see, we will discuss issues related to SB 743, which is the change in use of LOS as a finding of significance under CEQA. There are some issues related to CMP because the intersection LOS monitoring we do, how does that jive with the changes, under SB 743? The CMP isn't a CEQA document, so technically it's okay using a level of service, but we figure there's probably going to be some change in legislation to kind of put the two in line. But the CMAs are going to be having a meeting about that in the next month, actually in about 2 weeks, to discuss potential changes to CMP legislation. So we'll keep you posted on any changes there, and we'll do that as part of our SB 743 updates. Let's see, and we also document, our efforts made to achieve the requirements of the SCS, and that includes, listing all of our PDAs, our priority conservation areas, and the OBAG and PDA investment and growth strategy that you just heard about. So we make sure all that is documented. So that is basically what is included in the CMP. There's a schedule in there at the end of the staff report. The first thing you're going to see is the monitoring out there that I just mentioned in April and May. So, it'll be done in, to be consistent with school breaks and things like that. So we won't be out there, if Orinda is on school break, but Brentwood is in school, we'll do monitoring out in Brentwood if they're back in session, but we won't monitor Orinda while they're in session. So, but once colleges start letting out, like DVC, things like that, that's when we stop monitor. That's kind of the end of our monitoring period. So we look at each school district's spring break schedules and plan around that. We do mention in the schedule having project sponsors update the CIP. So if we do need to do any updates, that's when we'll do it, but we don't plan to do a big call for projects. So we'll be releasing a draft in July. That'll come to you in July for public comment. We'll incorporate those comments, and by October have a revised draft that will be submitted to MTC. MTC then reviews it and checks for consistency. Once they do that and give us comments, then we're able to adopt it. We've got it on there as in December, but it may go to January depending on schedules. And then once we've adopted it, we transmit it back to MTC. And that's the CMP. So basically, we're just asking for your blessing on the proposed approach, scope, and schedule, and recommend that to the Planning Committee and Authority. So I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Do I have Jeremy?
Thanks, Matt, for the update. A couple questions. I remember the last update that we did a couple years ago, there were several intersections that exceeded LOS levels. And I didn't see anywhere in the schedule where you're going to be bringing the results of these monitoring intersections back to the RTPCs. So it'd be really good if we can include that in the schedule, and also additionally have some proactive outreach with those jurisdictions, anticipating that since the economy's a little bit more robust than it was 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more traffic than there was 2 years ago, that we can have a proactive dialogue versus a reactive dialogue as we find out. So I don't know if you've given that any thought, but I certainly would appreciate that consideration, at least for the central county jurisdictions.
Yeah, and thanks, Jeremy. I did leave off the monitoring report. So we'll be bringing a draft monitoring report probably prior to the draft CMP, but it might be in July. The earliest would be June. But probably July. And last time around there were a few intersections in Central County that the first time around did exceed their level of service standard. I believe their standard was E and they came in at F. And so in those cases we do recounts. We recounted those and they did come out fine in the recounts. So we didn't have to prepare a deficiency plan. That's kind of the punishment for exceeding level of service standards. Prior to preparing a deficiency plan, we're able to go and exclude some traffic from the level of service analysis, like regional traffic. And last time around, the the routes that had the exceedances were, I believe, on Treat and Ignacio Valley, both of which do carry a fair amount of regional traffic. So if those same intersections exceed again, which they, based on what you just said, Jeremy, the changes in the economy since last time, there's a good chance that might happen. We would hope, that those the regional traffic would bring it back down, but maybe we can come back prior to the results coming out and just talk about what we would do in that case. So that's that. But we will have a monitoring report that we'll bring to you.
So going along with that question, when you do discuss this with the agencies that are impacted, whose levels of service exceed what was anticipated, do you give them an opportunity, like a lot of streets, they're doing the traffic calming or the changing the streetscape, so they're changing their classifications basically of the streets. Is that something that you discuss with them as opportunities to reduce the requirements?
That's a kind of a tricky one because all of the routes and the level of service standards are adopted, so we'd have to, I think, amend our CMP, and so that's something we'd have to consider. So if you're looking at a road diet or something on a CMP route or near a CMP intersection, that's something we would want to discuss. Brad is a veteran of 9 CMPs, so he may have
More than that.
Yeah.
I worked on the first one.
Yes.
One thing that Matt didn't mention that's important to remember is that the CMP network, that's the network that we analyze and monitor, is made up of state highways and principal arterials. So I would assume that it's not that likely you're going to be doing, you might do, no, I take that back. There might be some principal arterials that you would address. Now, what happens if your level of service is E, your standard, but you measure it and it's F, and you take out regional traffic and it's still F? What do you have to do? Under the CMP legislation, as it stands now, you have to prepare a deficiency plan. The deficiency plan doesn't necessarily mean that your improvements that you propose to undertake in the deficiency plan will bring the level of service within your standard. It's just, you just have to list the things that you want to do to address your concerns. So you have to, and when you do it, you have to do it with other jurisdictions that send traffic through that roadway and that intersection. So it's meant to be a collaborative plan, and they're laid out in our deficiency plan guidelines. It's one of the chapters in the CMP. It's meant to be a collaborative way of coming up with what you want to do. It's very much like the action plans where you have a route and you say, this is what the actions we want to take, this is what we want to achieve. You have much more flexibility with the action plans on what measures you want to establish. It doesn't have to be level of service. It can be transit ridership. It could be bicycle trips on the roadway. It could be any number of things. It depends on what you agree that you want to achieve for that roadway. It could be truck traffic or whatever.
Thank you.
Maybe this is a question for Brad. I thought I recall South County intersections as part of the monitoring in years past. Has the list changed, or?
South County has no CMP, is not part of the CMP network other than 680. They are, the last monitoring we did CMP and MTSO monitoring at the same time. So you were part of the last monitoring just because we combined the two, and we'll be doing that again in 2017. But for this round, you have no intersections, just the freeway.
Is there a reason for that?
I think because when we established the CMP network for the county, the jurisdictions did not want.
You might not want to put it that way, but
Sorry, I don't know the
We had
history,
a-
so.
there was a long discussion about what a principal arterial was. It is not defined in the legislation. So we came up with criteria on what should be included. The CMP network is a subset of the regional route network. There are regional routes in South County, but there are no CMP networks other than 680, as Matt said. And at that time, there weren't any routes that met the criteria. But this was, remember, 1990 that we set those up. So it was about 25 years ago.
Some of us don't remember that.
15. No, 25.
Yeah, and we, as long as I've been here, we haven't had any requests to expand the CMP network just because the requirements are a little more onerous than being part of the routes of regional significance. So,
Much less flexible.
A quick question, Matt. Your report says the CIP may include maintenance and rehab projects. What's the criteria for that? Because the list is going to come from CTPL, right? And I don't think there's maintenance project on those lists.
Depends on the jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions did put in some maintenance.
So so
You could.
you could add that part of that. Okay, thank you.
I had a follow-up question. So it looks like in the background study, the counts are going to include bike and ped, which there are no adopted LOS levels for bike and ped. And looking at the list of monitoring intersections, some of these facilities don't even have a bike. Some of these roadways don't even have a bike facility on them. And so my question is that just for informational purposes only for the jurisdictions so that they can monitor kind of the influx of bike and ped? And is that, I guess that was my question.
yeah, basically we decided, I think two CMP cycles ago, that this would be a good opportunity to just start collecting some, baseline bike and ped data at these intersections. And so the traffic counters are really just collecting approach volumes at all four or however many legs of the intersection. So we're not doing turning movements or anything like that for bikes or pedestrians. It's really just to start a database where we can track trends or changes over time. And we're trying to put together a database format for this so we can more easily share it with you guys. But if any of you need these types of that type of information at any of these intersections, we do have it for since 2011.
But none in South County.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, you're looking for an action from us to approve the proposed approach, scope, and schedule. Do I have any motions?
I'll move to approve such.
Any second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So meeting is adjourned until next month on April 16th. Thanks, everybody.